Hello, we are going to be making conclusions at this station. If you haven't already, go ahead and get a worksheet in the center of your table. It's called Making Conclusions. It should be on your screen, Making Conclusions. We're going to be practicing making conclusions at this station. Follow along with the video. So go ahead, write your name on the paper, class, and date. I'll give you a few seconds to do that. Okay, follow along as I read. If you're not done, if you're not situated and ready yet, just go ahead and pause this video. We are going to be going on. So, I'm going to be just reading the paper to you, and then we're going to be making a conclusion together. So follow along as I read to you. Observation. I feel more tired after doing more jumping jacks. Scientific question. What would happen if we tried to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals? Inference. I infer that the number of jumping jacks we can do will increase, go up. Hypothesis. If we try to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals, then the number of jumping jacks we can do will increase, go up. Procedure. First, gather all materials, a timer, Ms. Mack, and Mr. Waka. Second, have Ms. Mack do as many jumping jacks as she can in 30 seconds. 3. Then, record the data in the data table. Fourth, repeat steps. Fourth, repeat steps number 2 and 3 2 more times. 5. After that, have Mr. Waka do as many jumping jacks as he can in 30 seconds. 6. Sixthly, record the data. 7. Then repeat steps number 5 and number 6 2 more times. Data collection. Mr. Waka had 30 jumping jacks in trial number 1. He had 29 jumping jacks in trial number 2, and he had 28 jumping jacks in trial number 3. Miss Mack had 35 jumping jacks in trial number 1. She had 31 jumping jacks in trial number 2. She had 25 jumping jacks in trial number 3. Data analysis, and this is where you need a pencil. Data analysis. What are the trends in the data? For Mr. Waka, the data is, for Miss Mack, the data is, go ahead and fill in the blank. I'll give you about 15 seconds to do that. Okay, if you're not done filling in the blank, pause this video. For Mr. Waka, I observed that the data is decreasing. So I'm going to write decreasing in my blank here. Decreasing. For Miss Mack, 35, 31, 25, the data is also decreasing or going down. So I'm going to write decreasing right here. And you should have decreasing and decreasing on your paper as well. If you do not, please pause this video. Now we're going to move on to the conclusion. Restate the scientific question. So for this, I'm going to go back and look at our original scientific question, which is right here. What would happen if we tried to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals? So I'm going to write that down. My scientific question was, I'll put quotes around it. What would happen if we tried to do jumping jacks? So we have what would happen if we tried to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals. Quotes around that. So that's my old scientific question. And it's good to restate the old scientific question. We're restating the question just like we would do in ELA. So here's our question. What would happen if we tried to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals? Make sure you have that written down. Okay, and then the next step is write your old claim, the old hypothesis. So I have to go back and copy now the old hypothesis. So if we try to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals, then the number of jumping jacks we can do will increase or go up. So I'm going to take that, the old hypothesis, and put it at the beginning of the experiment. My hypothesis was, put quotes around it, and I am on a computer so I can copy and paste, but you will obviously take longer to just write this on your paper. That's okay. And at any point, don't be afraid to pause the video. Okay, so we have write your old claim, the old hypothesis, and then we have at the beginning of the experiment, my hypothesis was if we try to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals, then the number of jumping jacks we can do will increase. Okay, I'm just going to clean this up. If you don't have that written down, go ahead and pause this video. Okay, now after the old claim or the old hypothesis, we're going to decide, do we need a new claim? Do we need a new hypothesis? My hypothesis was, and then I'm going to go back and look at the data. So I said that the data would increase 30, 29, 28, 35, 31, 25. That is a decrease. So my hypothesis was incorrect. So I'm going to write incorrect on that blank. My hypothesis was incorrect. So I'm going to circle need a new hypothesis. My hypothesis was incorrect, so I need a new hypothesis. My new hypothesis then will be is if we tried to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals. It's the same question. It's just a different hypothesis, so the ending is different. Then the number of jumping jacks we can do will, and then I'm going to say decrease, because that's what the data shows. So I'm going to make my new hypothesis needs to show the data that I collected. Okay, so my new hypothesis is if we try to do jumping jacks for 3 different 30-second intervals, then the number of jumping jacks we can do will decrease or go down. And that's supported by the data. We saw in the data that the number of jumping jacks went down. So our new hypothesis says it's going to decrease, it's going to go down. Okay, if you don't have that written down, go ahead and pause this video. Okay, write your evidence. Next section, write your evidence. Include numbers. Okay, my data table says that, and we're going to have to go back to the data. It says to include numbers. So my data says that Mr. Waka was able to do 30 jumping jacks at the beginning. My data table says that Mr. Waka did 30 jumping jacks at the beginning the experiment. At the end of the experiment, Mr. Waka did, 28 jumping jacks in trial number 3. Okay, and then we're going to go on to Miss Mack. So we have the data for Mr. Waka. Now we need the data for Miss Mack. So Miss Mack did how many jumping jacks at the beginning? 35. 35 jumping jacks at the beginning of the experiment. And then I'm just going to go and 25 jumping jacks in trial 3. Trial number 3, the end. Okay. Just gonna delete this. There we go. Okay, so my data table says that Mr. Waka did 30 jumping jacks at the beginning of the experiment. At the end of the experiment, Mr. Waka did 28 jumping jacks. Miss Mack did 35 jumping jacks at the beginning of the experiment and 25 jumping jacks in trial number 3, the end of the experiment. This does not include any reasoning or our new hypothesis. It just includes the numbers. The evidence is just the numbers. Now we get to write our reasoning. So my data supports my new, I'm going to circle new hypothesis because, and then I'm going to justify why my new hypothesis was needed. I'm going to explain why I wrote a new hypothesis. So my data supports my new hypothesis because Mr. Waka only did 28 jumping jacks at the end of the experiment, which was a decrease from the 30 jumping jacks that he did at the beginning. So you're just connecting the data to the new hypothesis. And I'm going to write the same went for Miss Mack. She only did, let's see, 25 jumping jacks at the end of the experiment, but she started with 35. This shows a decrease in jumping jacks, and that is all we need for that section. So the reasoning is just connecting your evidence to the hypothesis. Now, possible errors. What went wrong in the experiment? A lot of things can go wrong in experiments. This experiment, perhaps, Miss Mack did not eat breakfast in the morning, but Mr. Waka did. So that would mess with our data. So if Miss Mack did not eat breakfast, then maybe she wasn't as strong as she could have been. Another error, another possible error was, let's say, the timer. The timer was a little off. It counted 30 seconds as 40 seconds sometimes. So that would mess with our data. That would mean that maybe our data that we collected is not completely accurate. It's not the best it could be. And the purpose of this possible error section is to make sure that you did the best that you could possibly do in the experiment. And if you didn't, you have a chance to say why your experiment might not have been the greatest. Okay, let's see here. Possible next experiments. I want you to come up with what experiments could we do after this one.